Welcome back, everybody, for another episode here at the Antler Up Podcast. And we're joined tonight by Wade Childs. Wade, man, pleasure to have you on. I heard some awesome stuff about you. Excited to get into it, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Hopefully, all that stuff might be true. Might be a little embellished as well, but yeah, that's all right.
Awesome, man. Well, in my eyes, they're all true. So,
all right.
So, Wade, man, where are you coming from? Let's get down to that. Like, what's going on, man? Where are you from? What's your story, dude?
Well, I grew up in a small town in like South Central Michigan. Little one stoplight, blinking red light town. Grew up on basically a sweet corn strawberry farm. Grew up outside. My dad had me shooting a bow in the driveway when I was 17 months old. I didn't have much choice in my life. I was going to be a bow hunter. So lived in the Jackson, Michigan area for 25 years, aside from like going to college in Kalamazoo. Chased whitetails around there my entire childhood and into my early 20s before I started venturing out and doing out-of-state trips. Learned a lot from my dad, then started branching out, doing more things, chasing more critters with my bow. So yep.
I like it, man. Well, geez, I mean, Dimitri and I, we're obviously from Pennsylvania, born and raised here. We always hear you don't, throw stones at me here, but like you always hear of like, man, Pennsylvania highly pressured, but man, Michigan is highly pressured, state. But Dimitri, look at behind him, man.
Yeah, I got a few Michigan bucks back there, some out of state ones too. That one over my shoulder right there, he's my best Michigan buck. He was 159. I shot him right there in Jackson County. I was quite a bit younger when I shot him, but it was one of those classic rut hunts, chasing a doe, and I was in a pretty good little funnel with some shooting, and he came out, and yeah, he got. So
yeah, I like that. Man, that's awesome. Well, let's kind of like start it off with just, I guess, kind of describe what kind of terrain and what you've been doing for as far as hunting goes. Like you said, I know you said you're going out of state, but like even keep it a little bit more, I guess, started off with locally. I mean, for us, we don't really care if it's private, public, mountains, not mountains, flatland. We just like to kind of hear, your hunting journey, if that makes sense.
Yep. So yeah, everything I learned and got my feet wet, cut my teeth, whatever you want to call it, in Southern Michigan was, rolling ag country, timber pockets, bottomlands. We don't have a lot of like drainages and creeks and things of that nature like you see in like the farther Midwest stuff, like the Missouri, Iowa stuff. We do have, some swamps, some bottoms, and some wetlands. That's kind of where our deer in Southern Michigan, if you're going to find a good one, that's probably where he's going to be. So I pretty well grew up on private ground. Used to have 15 to 2,000 acres that I hunted of private ground. That's dwindled down dramatically in the last 10 years of what I have available to hunt anymore. But grew up hunting that kind of stuff. Like I said, it's just a lot of row crop. Corn and beans is the two big things that are grown in that area. Get into like some alfalfa type of stuff, and we don't get into any of like the milo and like the sugar beet stuff. That's all out west and up north from us. So it's primarily, what you expect, the row crop. I would say, once I started getting out of Michigan, first place I went to, Southern Ohio, down in the Adams, Highland County area, the Amish buck area. I'm sure you guys know that deer. That was, getting into some hillier stuff. One of the leases we had there it was still pretty flat CRP ground. It kind of felt like home, able to kill a buck. I think 3 out of 4 years I hunted that lease. We ended up losing the lease. The landowner passed away, and but I was brought into that with a good group of guys, and they kind of were the stepping stone to start leaving the state. Since then, I've hunted, the high plains of western Nebraska. I drew an Iowa tag this last fall. I've hunted Illinois for 5 years. I've hunted Kentucky, and that's the one state that I feel I'm probably going to go back to this year because I have yet to kill a Kentucky buck, and that does not sit well with me. And I've killed deer in Missouri as well.
So talk about a little bit about your tactic and strategy. Start maybe at your home state of Michigan, since you are hunting, private. Are you aggressive on in the early season? Do you you talked a little bit about shooting that buck in the rut? Is that typically, what you kind of save typical spots for? Just kind of give us a quick rundown of, what your strategy leading into a season is for, mainly your home, property, whether it is private or public, if you're doing any of that in Michigan. And maybe one time you were doing it differently, and then you've kind of changed over the years, or anything in that nature.
Yep. So yeah, primarily all my Michigan stuff is going to be private stuff. I've dabbled a little bit on the public stuff. I actually live about a mile from Lake Michigan now, straight west of Grand Rapids. So it's pretty populated over here. It's pretty hard to get into anything private. So I have messed with a little bit of the public around here. It's like you said, it's hit pretty hard. So to attack a season in Michigan, it's going to be, I'm hunting farms I've hunted for 15, 20 years. I got them pretty well dialed in. I'm not afraid to be aggressive. Like I'm not saving spots for the rut. I'm diving in. I don't think a deer isn't killable at every day of the season. I'm not afraid to go after one. He's always going to be there. It's not like they get absorbed into the ground. Like I always see a lot of guys, it's not time yet. It's not time yet. But I've got other buddies that, will go after it. And we seem to be, pretty successful. And I used to do, like pre-hung stands and all that stuff. And about 10 years ago, got into the mobile game using muddy pro sticks, muddy vantage stands. And in the last couple of years, got into the saddle game, started, I've got everything tethered now, probably 2 seasons now, 100% saddle. If not, like a weird instance where you're hunting on the ground or something. But yeah, I get after them. I chase them. I don't like to sit back and wait for them to come to me. That's just waiting. That's not really the way I like to attack it anymore. So I've started paying more attention to, everything I hunt is based on the wind, and I'm taking it to them. So.
And what makes you be aggressive and not afraid to be aggressive? You relying on trail cameras, or is there just certain pieces of the property that you're able to be more aggressive? What is is it the fresh sign that you see going into that sit? What makes you feel confident that being aggressive is going to be successful?
I guess kind of like just the mindset I take into it. I'm literally constantly thinking about deer and how I can get them killed. So there's always puzzle pieces getting put together in my head. What are they going to do on this wind or that wind, or what's their food source right now? And we do run a fair amount of cell cams. I run between my brother and I, we probably have 6 or 8 of them in Michigan. We ran 22 of them in Iowa this year, and I think I had 14 of them in Illinois. So I do have some pretty recent intel on everything that's going on, what deer's on the property, and when they're there and why they're there. And I can take pretty good mental notes of that. And, if he's doing this on a northeast wind, how can I use that northeast wind that he thinks he has the advantage to get him on a quartering wind and slip around him and have him come by me? That's what I'm doing.
I like that. And man, I'll tell you what, Wade, when you said about not saving spots, right? And you're just saying, like, you just go after, get in there.
Yep.
Man, I mean, I've been guilty to saying, like, man, that's a good spot during this time. And you know what I mean? Even if there's intel of, that buck could be traveling or living nearby, like I've gone into that stalemate basically of not wanting to get into a particular spot until a certain time period. And as you were talking like that, and my mind's going, well, yeah, why do you do that, Jer? Like, why do I do that? And I guess it's because it's that old school mentality of what I'm, kind of Dimitri and I were raised by our fathers, and it seems like too, Wade, about that of, we were told one way, and like you said, just take it to them. And ironically enough, I was talking to my father today, and we were talking about an area back at home in Northeast Pennsylvania that, I had some decent bucks on it, but he and I did not go in there until later on in November. And he's like, we got to get in there earlier. And I was like,
yep.
Like I was driving. I was like, wait, what'd you say? And like, cause that's what I was thinking. And kind of like what you were saying, man, because if you get in there in October 14th, I know people have said, oh, that's done, but do we really know if that spot's done? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think the longer we've been doing this and the longer there's education out there, I don't really think it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, those deer have to eat and they have to drink and they have to get up. They're not going to lay. I mean, they might move in the last 30 minutes of daylight. You might not have that all day, chase and phase or, something of that nature that you get in November, but they're going to do something at some point in the day that makes them killable. And I'm not afraid to go after them.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your maybe key attributes that you've honed in on? Like obviously being aggressive, doing the whole mobile thing. When it comes to maybe like Dimitri, I liked what you said earlier about like using certain tactics. Are you like, what are maybe certain buck sign that you're prioritizing with like scrapes or rubs, time of year? What, like, do you do anything along those lines, especially for being aggressive? Because to me, like being aggressive and sign goes hand in hand for that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not doing food source stuff, I'm definitely probably looking for scrapes, and then keying in on terrain features of, leeward side bedding is probably, it's like I say, I'm always chasing wind stuff. That wind stuff is always related to leeward side bedding or travel routes to food source.
Yeah. Dimitri, go ahead.
Tactics that carrying on to some of these out of state trips, just because you've talked about several different states, and the terrain features in all of those are a little bit different, and you're going to counter different things. What are some things that maybe you're doing in Michigan that you are taking with you and applying those to the other states, even though the terrain and the habitat is so different?
I would say really what I learned on my primary farm in Michigan is just understanding how they use those east side and south side hill faces for your getting in early and getting them coming back to bed on those. They're typically brushier. They're typically thicker than your north side or west side faces. And with that, I'm taking knowledge that I'm learning in Michigan, applying it to topographic map and Onyx, and looking at satellite views coupled with topography, taking it to like the Iowa public land that I hunted this year. And I had 4 different instances this year in Iowa that I had a 140-inch buck under 30 yards, and I was lucky enough to get an arrow in the last one of them. So
yeah, dang, dude, that's awesome. So cool. So when you look at that and you're looking at like the terrain features, and like for us, like Dimitri and I, we key in on like with hunting the bigger mountains here, we're keying in on points and kind of trying to access to see where where deer are maybe going to funnel to and all that type of stuff. What are like kind of your bread and butter, especially with the wind access? Because for me, that's always been, I think, like a weak side, like a weak like attribute to my hunting skill set, and something that I tried to do better at for this year, which I think I did a pretty good job at. But I'm still trying to understand, I guess, like the thermals and how that all plays a part, and like especially in the big woods setting. Like how much of that do you take into effect to go with your wind and kind of your terrain features?
As far as the thermal stuff, it's generally about going up in the mornings and down in the evenings. I pretty much have developed the mindset in the last 5 or 6 years that you got to give something up. If you think if everything in your head makes sense that deer is doing that, but you're afraid you're going to blow everything out and 90 degrees to your, to your north or whatever, on a south directional wind, you know, you just have to accept the fact that you're going to scare deer. I mean, you're going to scare deer walking in, you're going to scare deer walking out. Obviously, you don't want to do that. And you try to make your entrances and exits as clean as possible. But once you accept the fact that you're going to scare some deer and you think that you're going to put yourself in a better position rather than watch them walk by at 100 yards, that's where I started seeing more success in getting shots and shooting under and over and finally into deer when I started doing it. So,
yeah.
Now you said about don't be afraid of, scaring deer. Is there any instance or story that you can kind of, think about that maybe you've done that, or, maybe you didn't kill a deer, but you bumped the deer and then you use that kind of knowledge to your advantage to kind of set up a future hunt that, maybe you had an encounter with the same deer, maybe you killed the deer. Do you have any kind of stories being aggressive in that way?
yeah, I think really about the first year that I kind of started doing some mobile stuff would have been like 2013, I want to say. There was a deer in Michigan we were chasing. We called him Bubba. He was, that low 160s deer. And he disappeared on us, showed up December 1st, day after gun season, came walking in broad daylight, late morning. Like, for all intents and purposes, I shouldn't have been hunting. It was the morning after gun season closed in Michigan, which is just a slaughter fest. It was raining. It wasn't very cold. And he, here he come walking in. And I distinctly remember I was sitting in an old ladder stand, and I was lazy and I didn't want to hang a stand that morning. That whole rigmarole. I had a buddy call me up. He's like, "Hey, I'll film for you this morning if you want to go." I'm like, hell yeah, man. Let's go. We walk in and, we're not seeing shit. And all of a sudden look up and it's like, holy crap, here he's come. Here he's, walking straight down this lane. And he is walking straight into the wind, no quartering whatsoever. And it was like, okay, it's on. I'm going to be chasing this dude for the rest of the season. So I had exactly 1 month to get him killed with my bow, because season in Michigan ends January 1st. It's our last day. And I ended up seeing him 3 more times that season. And every time I would try to move, try to do something different, I think that deer, I'm a firm believer that he would watch me access. I would try to slip around these ridges, because the farm that he was living on is very long and skinny, and the access was from the north, and it's the only way you could get in there. And he would live on the east side of it, and the whole east side was a big oak ridge with I want to say it was picked corn in the middle of that year. And he would lay on that ridge top and either smell everything coming down the access road, or watch just over the top of the ridge if the wind was north or south rather than straight west. And I just couldn't get into him, and he was not afraid of walking around in the daylight, and everything I could do to kill him, and he beat me, and he survived the season. And that deer, I was kind of able to sit back and think about it for 9 months, apply everything that I learned from him. And actually the next season I had him at 12 yards, full draw. Couldn't get I was dedicated to filming at the time. Couldn't get the camera on him. Had him beat. I just had to shoot him. He ended up giving me about 8 to 10 seconds right there at full draw. And, he busted out of there. And 2 days later, a neighbor killed him. And he was 187. So, yep, that one hurt. I have his sheds upstairs. He's, he is like the deer that I still haunts my dreams. It's been 10 years. So,
oh man.
Well, and I think that's something that not a lot of people talk about is, deer. A lot of mature bucks like to, watch access and know where people are going to come in from. And, and sometimes we get in this mindset that those mature bucks are just going to head to the deepest, thickest areas that, that humans can't get to, or some sort of predator's not going to find them. And I don't think that's always the case. And not a lot of people are kind of say what you just said. And and I've seen it before, like especially during rifle here in PA, where it's a slaughter fest too, right? And you have all these people, and there was a small clear cut 60 yards from the pull off and where the trucks park, and we kind of skirted past it, going deep into this public. Came back through, did a small push through this little piece, and there was a nice mature buck that jumped out, and you could see the truck from where he was bedded. And I think, those are kind of the overlooked spots that you can find some bucks bedded in that are easy to access, where you could probably get around or take a different route to kind of get near that bedding. And I just think that not a lot of people are thinking in that mindset or talking about that, where you could really use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had a really similar thing to that happen this year in Iowa. I was hunting there with one of my best friends from Missouri. Him and I drew tag together. We've been looking forward to it for all these years, and he had kind of a situation at home where he needed to head home and be with his girlfriend. And so I was up there by myself and sleeping in the back of my truck, doing it cheap, doing it down and dirty. I was on, I want to say day 5 or 6, and I pushed. I was probably 1.5 miles deep on public, and some pretty good sized piece of timber. And I had saw some deer that morning, and nothing really all that exciting. And I slipped out. It was Halloween morning. I slipped out. I happened to run into the hunting public guys that morning at the parking spot, talked to them, talking to some other guys, called a buddy from Missouri just to talk. And he's like, you're not blowing past the deer, are you? And I got to thinking, like those words just kept resonating with me as I was sitting behind my truck in the shade because it was pretty warm that day, thinking, man, these deer are in this picked corn at night. I know that they are because I see them when I pull in here to hunt in the mornings. And I got in my head that I just needed to go deeper, and I just needed that, that last piece of the puzzle, that something needed to spark in me. I ended up walking 150 yards across this cornfield, parallel in the parking lot. Yep. I dumped maybe 50 yards into the timber, and 2 hours later I filled my tag. So same situation. That deer, and I had seen people that morning coming from the other side, and they came every bit as far as I did. They were at least 1 mile in to be able to see their headlamps as they were walking the opposite ridge. Everybody was, pushing past them, trying to be that Billy Badass, and the bucks are just, one-upping everybody, watching them go and doing their thing by the parking spots.
Yep. So. Yep. Well, Dimitri, that happened to you and I, 2-3 years ago, when you saw the chocolate horn antlered buck, like just up on the trail. Like that's not that far from where we parked. I mean, you walked only 100, not even probably 100 yards up the snowmobile. And then Zach Farrenball talked about that on our podcast, where a friend of his was watching, same thing, like a buck was watching them. And then there was a recent podcast too that I listened to. Another individual was talking about that. Like it's funny how it's not a more common, topic that people talk about. But man, because even think about it, how many individuals love those big loud mufflers on their trucks every morning, and they're just at 3-4 in the morning, they're going down that WMU, our road, and those deer hear that. It's the same thing. It's even the same thing that I have, on the private mountain. Like I hate going to where we park, but there's really not another spot for us to park. I mean, we can, it's just, I don't know. It's like you said, it's being almost lazy. So something that I've want to change as well for my dad and I, because at the same time, it is a road that we could walk on basically. So it's just, why don't we just walk on it? We're not going to be ripping through brush, at least we can be a little bit more quiet, and it's not going to be driving right up, because hell, within 80 yards on a camera that I had near where our truck is, there was one of the bigger deers ever and that I've ever seen. So it's like, like you said, he's around somewhere, and you just have to go unnoticed a little bit. And that's definitely one of the tactics that I want to implement for next year.
Yeah, it's some of these deer that live in, Michigan and Pennsylvania and, these high pressure states, they get big because they know, they know the game. They know what everybody's doing. And I think that, they're hunting us or hunting the sorry, I can't come up with the right words. They're avoiding us just as much as, you know, we're trying to hunt them.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you said the word pressure, and I, like you said earlier, when it comes to hunting Michigan, you're more so on that private side of things, you know. And we've talked about it here on the podcast. I still think hunting private land still has its challenges, right? Like it's still not, you know, like, oh, you got private land, I bet you it's so easy to do this. You know, what some things that you've had to kind of adjust and get better at on private pieces that you think is still a challenge?
Yeah, I think, you know, some of the private, especially in an area like where I'm at, it's so many small parcels, you know, tied together. And the piece I'm on is the second biggest, I think, in the section, and it's 155 acres. So it's not terribly big. It's not small, but you know, there's I think that I counted I think I counted 22 people hunting it opening morning in just my square 1 mile this last year. So I've pretty much just developed the tactic of when there's this many people, just don't worry about the best spots, just avoid the people as much as you can. You know, the spot that I hunted opening morning of rifle season or shotgun season this last fall, which I think is the first time I've even hunted one in 10 years. It was 150 yards behind one of the houses that kind of borders the property. Just because I knew kind of all the pressure is going to push every deer up, you know, to this thick little bottom that just has a lot of understory in it. So, and I did see, I think I saw like 42 or 44 deer that morning. So,
yeah, damn, crazy.
Yeah, we have some numbers, but quality is just lacking.
Yeah. What here's a question for you, Wade. How do you find like the spot? You know, like that is the core area. You know, what kind of check boxes are checked when, you know, what boxes are checked when you see X and you're like, this is where I'm going?
Yep. I would say, you know, it's all going to be, obviously, I'm going to keep preaching wind dependent, but it's got to have, you know, the right facing slopes are two of my big things. Are the deer going to come my direction because of food in the evenings, or are they going to be coming back in the mornings? So I'm trying to get in between that bedding and that food. I'm looking for historical sign and obviously fresh sign. Old rubs, easy to spot. And then you've got your interior and your community scrapes. The interior scrapes, I think, are probably my favorite thing to hunt. That's what I shot my buck on in Iowa. That's what my buddy I was hunting there with, he shot his buck on this ridge line that was full of interior scrapes. That's probably what I would look for as the number one thing. It seems to be a magnet of all these deer are going to go at least, you know, stick their nose in the branch one time as they're walking by, or at least check it in a somewhat downwind fashion, to where you can use that as a, you know, way to get a shot off. I don't really go into the woods looking for like, man, I need to find a buck bed, or I need to find, you know, warm season grasses or an oak tree that's dropping. I always have, you know, a fluid mindset when I'm walking in, like, let's just go find something that looks good, and when it feels right, climb a tree.
You talked about the right facing slope. Can you dive into a little bit more of like what that entails and what you're looking for those slopes?
Yep. I'm always looking, like I said earlier, I think leeward side, you know, the downwind side of a slope. So if I'm looking at a topography map, something that's got either some type of bench or like a toe off of a ridge that a deer can lay just over the top, see everything in front of them, then anything that's coming over top of the ridge, you know, they're going to smell. So the wind has to be right. And that, I think those spots change, you know, day in and day out, just because the wind is changing with them. And they'll change throughout the year as the understory changes as well. So if it's, you know, later in the season, you can throw some cedars in there. I'm going to, you know, go towards that. Early October, you know, looking for oak trees or nearby green bean fields, things of that nature, and then get to that closest bedding from there.
Nice.
Now, if you're talking about those slopes, now do you think if a buck's bedded on the leeward side, and maybe the wind, it's a finger ridge, and the wind shifting the opposite direction, do you think that he will actually move? Will you hunt and move to the opposite ridge that following evening or the day you're hunting? Do you think he kind of like flip-flopping like that, or do you think, how do you feel like those mature bucks are adjusting to the change in wind?
I typically seem to have more success and more sightings, and even trail camera data of them using these features and which direction they're always traveling. I think maybe 80% of the time, I shouldn't say always, at least the wind is somewhat into their face, whether it's across their face or dead on. So if that wind changes, the morning to the night, then I'm going to adjust accordingly as well. I think the deer are probably doing that midday as well. So I'm not afraid to always assume the deer has the wind in its favor. So I'm trying to use that against the deer.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of dive into then about your season. You got the Iowa buck and Michigan, man, like wherever you want to start with kind of recapping this past year, because I'm fascinated, because I want to see what, I have a couple ideas where I want to go then afterwards, but I want to see what other questions, will pop up because of the stories, dude.
Yep. So the season started, I had a piece in Northern Illinois, kind of walked away from it this summer. Randomly had a buddy that I've talked to online for 5 or 6 years about hunting, and never met him in person. He just called me up one day. He said, "Hey, I've got an opportunity to hunt, or to add a guy onto this lease. We had a guy back out. Are you interested in joining it?" And here I was, not really an idea of where I was going to hunt besides Iowa. Yeah, well, I'll go check it out. He's been sending me pictures of this deer that was, I mean, we're talking like mid-July. So he's, got a good frame, but he doesn't have much time length. And it's like, he'd send me these progression of this growth pictures, and it's just like jaw dropping. I'm like, dude, do you really want me to come hunt this farm with you? And he lives in Phoenix. So it's like, he's not going to be there very often. So I almost felt guilty that I was going to go hunt this farm that's, 5 hours, 6 hours away. So I ended up joining in on the lease with him. Long story short, another buddy was able to get on it as well, because another guy wasn't able to hunt it because of some health issues. So two of us went down there October 1st. My buddy that I hunt pretty much everywhere with, him and I travel all over. He shoots a doe in the morning, first time he'd ever been on the lease. We looked at a map and said, let's choose these two spots. They're not very invasive. Obviously the PM sit's going to be better October 1st, because we've still got some green beans. So let's just do something that's on the outskirts near the road. He shoots a doe. We're celebrating, drinking beers midday, meet the landowner, having a good old time. It's like, time to go out for the evening. We decided to sit. There's it's kind of like a series of bays, that the way that these drainages come out in this timber. And we just kind of each picked one, and he happened to pick the right one. We had a 6 or 7 year old deer come out, walked right to him. He shot it. Great day. I mean, he filled both his Illinois tags the first day. So now here I am, nobody to hunt with in Illinois the rest of the season, until, my buddy Brad from Phoenix shows up late. And then I've got the Iowa tag. Ended up going to Iowa the next weekend. I think it was this. It would have been like October 8th that weekend.
Okay.
I had a work trip. I had to go. I think I actually went to PA that day, or that weekend. And I had a rental car. I'm like, to hell with it. I'm going to drive this rental car out to Iowa for 2 days and hunt. And we did. And I had a big deer, like mid 160s, hammer heavy, hunting some, like what I thought was going to be the early season bedding. I think I was off on that, to be honest with you, but I happened to be close enough to it to where I had this deer in some briars at 30 yards, unable to get a shot, per usual. Picked one tree away from what I should have. And he stood there for 5 minutes feeding, and I was just able to pick out bits and pieces of him through the maple leaves. So didn't kill him that week. Ended up, I think I went to Illinois one more weekend, saw some deer. Nothing. I remember it being really, really hot. We were camping outside on the neighbor's mowed lawn. He allowed us to throw a tent up there. Great guy. Super thankful that we met him, and we roughed it, camped it, hunted pretty slow. Turned around, went back to. I was driving back to Iowa, and I was going to meet my buddy Kylie in Iowa, and this would have been like October 28th. And I'm like coming around Lake Michigan. I'm kind of nearing the Indiana border, I want to say. Cell cam goes off. I look at it. It's like, oh shit, there's, one of the deer that we've been, waiting to show back up to go hunt in Illinois. Kylie's in Iowa. He'd already been there for a day. I call him. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And I call him and I wake him up, and he's like, "You're not coming to Iowa, are you?" I'm like, "Nope, I'm turning her south, going to Illinois." Ended up going because it was, you drove halfway to Illinois, the Illinois farm on your way to Iowa anyway. So went and hunted Iowa for one sit, and I was like, this is not any fun. I'm here by myself. It's miserable. I don't even want to do this. And I hopped in my truck, drove back to Iowa, back north again to Iowa after dark that night, hunted with Kylie for 2 days, and then he had to go home. Stayed in the truck, a couple more nights by myself, sleeping in the back seat. And I'm 6'4", and I don't really fit in the back seat of an F-150 all that well. So get to Iowa, or get to this unit, and I think we were in unit 5. Get to this piece of public land, and like I said, I ended up shooting that deer Halloween evening. Rattled them in. I walked in until I found that first interior scrape. I remember seeing one of those along this ridge line, a trail that looked like it was pretty heavily used by does, heading out to that pit cornfield. It's Halloween, right? Bucks are going to be starting to check this. I decided that was where I was going to sit. The wind made sense. Everything made sense when I got in there. Found a tree that offered some pretty good shooting. I didn't want to have a October 8th situation again. I had just had another one of those situations, I want to say 2 days before, where I rattled another buck. He was probably mid 150s into 35 yards, picked the wrong tree in the dark. Didn't get a shot at him either. So Halloween evening, I picked a tree that I thought was going to be the one, climbed up it, and then right as the sun went over the ridge, I looked down, and he was walking up this ridge, and he gave me about a 32, 33 yard shot. Hit him back. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm the best bow shot in the world. I am horrible. But I continue to press on. I shoot a lot, and I've been more confident and successful the last several years than I was, 6-8 years ago. But we let him lay overnight. A good buddy, Tyler Cooper from Missouri, drove up the next morning, walked in, and he was 125 yards dead right there. So that was Iowa. He was 143 inch. We figured 4-year-old, heavy base, short tine, 10-point, 24-inch main beams, and 10 inches of brow tine total, and good mass, just short tines. So drove from there to Missouri to Kylie's hometown, hunted with my other best friend in Missouri, Cody Howard, for 2 days. Just like, I've got 10 days off of work. I just killed a great buck. Iowa dream come true. Gonna enjoy this. Gonna hunt with my buddy that I don't get to see that often. Him and I had 3 encounters and 3 sits in a row with 150 to 170 inch deer we didn't get arrows into. It's like, okay, I need to go have a bow in my hand. I'm leaving Missouri, drove to Illinois, hunted a couple of days there, ended up getting sick while I was there, cut my vacation short, drove home, went back down the next weekend, and now it's fast forward, it's November 11th. I'm on the Illinois lease, sitting there, and I remember it being really cold that day. It was like the first day I broke out my real heavy warm gear. And I was Snapchatting a video to my brother about how nasty the wind was, because he was sending me pictures of videos of deer in Michigan, it being, you know, bluebird sky, sunny, awesome, everything that you want it to be. And I'm just miserable by myself, freezing. And I send a Snapchat. I put my phone in my pocket. I look to my left, and there's one of the target deer at 30 yards, right? So it was another situation. Pick a tree in the dark. He ended up giving me like a 22, 23 yard shot. I hit a limb and bounced it right over his back.
Oh,
He ran off, and I climbed straight down out of the tree, cut the tree down that I hit because I was mad at it. I didn't want to sit there and look at it any longer. Climbed back up the tree, got back and clipped back into my saddle. And 15 minutes later, here comes this deer that we knew to be 6 years old from all of Brad's trail cam pictures. And he's got this doe, he's tending her hard. And I ended up watching him for 3.5 hours, 60 yards and in. He almost gave me 2 or 3 different shots at about 30 yards. Finally, this little buck that was trying to get in on this doe that he ended up coming between the buck and I. The big old mature buck got up, chased him off, turned broadside at 20 yards, and yeah, I slipped one through him. I hit him, you know, onside long and out, like back of the liver. So he was quartered, but you know, the arrow setup I'm shooting, not afraid of that shot. And I watched him walk off, lay down. I shot him right at, it was like 12:01, so I shot him right at noon, and watched him walk off, lay down. I slipped out of there, let him lay all night, went back in the next morning. There he was. So that was pretty well my season. I ended up shooting 3 or 4 does in Michigan after that, and that was about it.
dang, man, you're in it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like constant. That's awesome. I mean, that's what they're the opportunities, the chances that you want to have, right? Like they're the things that we right now in February, we're like, man, I cannot wait for the season to roll around to have those encounters. And, you know, I mean, I think for these out of state trips, like obviously the Iowa, you have to draw that tag. Illinois, you know, you don't have to draw that one, but then going to Missouri and, you know, bouncing around a little bit, you know, obviously you have to do some e-scouting. Do you go nerd out on that type of stuff at all?
Yeah, I spend a lot of times looking at maps and satellite imagery and just trying to, you know, drop pins. My Onyx is pretty, like, you zoom out, it's just a red blob. You know what looks good. I'll take those pins and those ideas and start applying them once, you know, the different weeks of the season roll around. But yeah, I bet 80% of my scouting is e-scouting.
Yeah.
Living in Michigan and, you know, working full-time job, I'm always, you know, my vacation is the fall. I don't take the time in, you know, the spring and the summer that I should. Like, you know, you talk to guys like Andy May, he's killing his deer in April or March, you know. That's how he kills the majority of his bucks, is all that scouting. And I don't do that. I'll be the first to admit it. I wish I did. I wish I had the time, but I don't have the time for it. So I have to do what I can, and that's look at maps and apply the things that I've learned in the woods to what I think that those maps are telling me. And I'll walk in there. If I like it, I'll set up. If I don't like it, I'll keep pushing to the next one. So
that was, I don't mean to cut you off, Dimitri. That was going to be my next question, is like, how much stock do you put into this time frame, right? Like how much, you know, to get out there this postseason, see what sign was laid down the most recent or this past season, that type of stuff. Because, you know, for it, you know, in the years past, I've coached baseball, so I didn't have that opportunity to really get out that much. And now I don't have that opportunity. I'm trying to do more of that, right? And I know now helps you, but it doesn't, you know, it's no guarantee, right? Like, I don't know how many people, we've had on the podcast or you listen to on podcasts or videos. I mean, it's still deer hunting, right? Like it's still, you know, a real animal. It does, like, you could put 500 miles on that, doesn't mean you're going to kill a deer. So I think, but the other side of that is, for me personally, it's like, yeah, that's great, finding new sign, maybe new opportunities. I want to gain better, enhance my woodsmanship, right? That's what I want to try to do, because for me in the years past, it's like, okay, e-scouting, a little bit of in the summer, and then, like you said, kind of, you don't want to be hoping for the best, right? And that's where I kind of, I guess, fell into that trap. So I'm trying not to fall into that. So my woodsmanship, I want to enhance. So that was like a question for you, Wade, was how much stock do you put in? And it, obviously not that much.
No, I would be lucky to make, like, especially the Illinois lease. I think I made it down one time before I was there with a bow in my hand. And then Iowa, Kylie and I made a trip out there one time in July and hung a bunch of cell cameras and what we thought was going to be good in the fall. And it ended up, we're looking at features of the land more so than current deer sign. Obviously, you're not looking at deer sign in July. Whatever they're doing in July isn't going to mimic what they're doing when we're there with bows. So I don't put very much stock into spring and summer, other than knowing the bucks that are in the area. That's really all I care about.
Go ahead, Dimitri. I didn't mean to cut you off before.
No, I was going to ask a similar question. Just, I was going to ask how much time you put in, just because, there's out of state trips, you like you said, you limited time, days off, so you're not going to spend a lot of that time, scouting. You're going to take them in the fall when you can actually hunt. And I had a similar situation where, I went out to Ohio this fall, and I had one day of scouting out in Ohio and setting some trail cameras, and it's like you said, it's kind of hard to gain any, knowledge. We went out in August, which is similar to July, where there's, you're looking at terrain and different features versus, rubs and scrapes and, all that kind of sign that's going to tell you where those bucks are hanging out. So, it's very hard to kind of piece those puzzles together, especially on out of state trips when you have limited time and resources. But, and I think it just goes to show, the current situation of when you're out there is going to play more important role than that, that scouting and that camera inventory.
Right. Yeah. I'm definitely a big believer in MRI, most recent intel. What are you finding when you're there, more so than, what was there in last year or the year before. I think that, your deer are going to do historically similar things, but, the buck you're chasing might do something just one off. So let's go, with most recent intel.
Now, could you share maybe a story or an opportunity where on either out of state hunt or in state that you kind of, okay, the wind's doing what I thought it was supposed to do, or maybe it's doing the other thing, where you really need to pivot and do something totally different, where maybe you were able to capitalize on seeing a deer or killing a deer, anything along those lines? Because they're the good learning moments that in the moment that I don't think we realize until obviously something happens, right? So, what has, maybe it doesn't even have to be from this past year, it could be from previous years, anything along those lines, Wade, that kind of sticks out, because again, I think those are really good learning opportunities and learning moments.
Yeah, trying to think of a good one. I would say 2018, I was hunting my first time down in Missouri. I was hunting some public ground down there. I had just killed a buck in Illinois. I went down to my buddy Cody's house, stayed with him, and going to go hunt some public. And I remember watching or looking at maps, again, and finding this area, this piece of public we were hunting was pretty damn flat as far as where you want it to be, like with the timber and the river. And there's like a big marshy area that was involved in this. And it was all just one big flat. And I remember sliding in there the first afternoon that I hunted it. And the wind was not what I thought it was going to be doing in that spot. And I was really like, this deer has to be in this bend of this river. He has to be. There's one terrain feature, and it was like a dried up, washed out creek bed that came down and made like a 90-degree turn. And that was really all that there was in this timber. And there was a fair amount of sign, walking into it. So I knew everything between this dry creek bed and the actual river, which was quite high. Like you or I aren't going to cross it. I remember slipping in there and it was wrong. It was bad. I was going to just ruin the spot. I knew it was a spot that I wanted to hunt. Found a tree, picked the tree out, climbed up it. I think I sat there for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, this isn't good. These deer aren't going to be doing what I think they're going to be doing. The wind, what I expected to be doing was walking either north to south or south to north, and and the wind was blowing pretty well straight west, which would have, I don't think a buck would have been doing anything that I wanted to do on that wind.
Okay.
And I slipped out of there, went back to the truck and left, and came back in the morning, and I actually shot the farthest buck on the bottom over there that next morning. And he was doing that dry creek bed walk, ended up missing him. He ran to the brush. I got down, checked my arrow, climbed back up. He must have heard me, thought I was a deer, came back to investigate, and took one in the side. And I think if I would have stayed that night and tried to hunt that incorrect wind, I probably wouldn't have killed him. So,
wow. Whew. That is good.
So, what are some things that you're doing now to kind of prep for your upcoming season here in 2023? Some people are shed hunting, some people are shooting and tuning their bows. What is your February, March looking like to prepare for that 2023 season?
Really all I've got is I'm kind of in this weird limbo funk right now of like, I don't know what state I'm going to end up in this fall. We had plans to hunt Kansas, talking to some buddies and some other people that had been out there, and it seems like Kansas has just really turned into a circus the last couple of years. I don't know if I want to just go hunt alongside of a bunch of Michiganders, 900 miles away. I've got some thoughts about hunting Kentucky. I've got, my like best hunting buddy that I travel everywhere with. He actually lives in Kentucky. He's got some awesome public ground around his house and private ground that I can hunt. I think right now my biggest thing is I don't even know where the hell I'm going to be this fall. Aside from Western Illinois, I don't know where I'll be. So it's going to be figuring out, what tag I'm going to have in my pocket come the fall. And once I get that determination and work schedules, everything lines up, it's time to find those pins to start chasing. If I can make it out there in July, to at least get eyes on the ground to know what I can rule out come the fall. And yeah, that's really all I have on my plate right now. That and shooting my bow. I shoot as often as I can in this dreadful Michigan weather this time of year. We get, pounded by lake effect snow, and we don't see the sun for 30 days. So it's hard to be outside, but I shoot as much as I can just to try to keep target panic down and start e-scouting. That's really the two things on my plate, until probably July, August.
I like it. That's good, Wade. What about, you were kind of the key thing in one aspect that I love, that the theme of it was earlier when you were talking about some of your strategies and some of your key characteristics of being aggressive, right? And I think if you would have asked us 3 years ago, what does being aggressive mean to you? And I would have been like, oh, getting as close to that bedding as possible, right? And putting yourself in a situation where, I guess, we have a thought or a notion that we think a deer is there, we're going to just go in and at them, right? What can you maybe explain to a listener, someone that's changing tactics, that wants to be a little bit more aggressive, like maybe some learning curves or tips, tricks, tactics, things that, you wish you would have known? Obviously doing is the best learning experience, but what are maybe some certain things that like you really key in on to hopefully not make a mistake at?
I guess the biggest thing that I've learned, I hate to admit this, I've got a good buddy in Missouri, and he's a turkey hunter, and he's one of the guys that chases states all over the place, and he's trying to kill a turkey in every state. And watching him and talking to him a lot.
Aren't those guys really weird? They're so odd. Like
you have no idea how much we make fun of this guy for being a turkey hunter, but I love him to death. But yeah,
I know we're the same way. There's a Andrew Mills honey hole game calls here locally. Dude's on the same mission as well, and I guess the same could be said for us freaks that want to go kill a whitetail in every state, right? Like we go do all this stuff, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I like going out turkey hunt when I have the opportunity, but it does not get my rocks off by any means.
Yeah, I'll go kill one and then I'll go do something cool. That's like my mantra of turkey hunting. But no, he just talking with him, and we've got this chat of a bunch of us. There's like 12 of us that talk on there, and just rip each other to shreds every day, and actually get into some hunting content as well on the side. But just being that ninja in the woods, and when you're pushing, you have to be observant. If you're not going to pick those puzzle pieces up as you're going into the woods to be aggressive, and you just walk past them, well, you might be blowing the whole thing up before you even get set up. So I would say if you're going to be aggressive, it's to slow down, which doesn't sound like the advice that you would give, but yeah, slowing down so you can speed up is the number one thing. What is it? Smooth is fast, or slow is smooth, and smooth is fast, or whatever. It's something like that. But that's what I would say. That'd be the number one thing I would recommend.
I like it. What about your setup? You're saying you've been saddle hunting the last 2 years, and you're doing a little bit more mobile with the hang on and stuff. Did it just take you that long because you didn't want Blair to be right, or what was that about?
So I was at the ATA show, and probably I think that they had just released the Phantom, so that would have been like 2020, I want to say 2019, somewhere in there. And Blair has me come over to the tethered booth. He's like, dude, you just gotta try it. I'm like, I don't want some stupid rope in front of me being in my way. Like, I already struggle enough shooting a bow. Like, when I say I'm bad at shooting my bow, I'm bad at shooting my bow. But I got in this thing at the ATA show, and I just looked at him. I was like, God damn it, dude, you're right. And I don't like to admit that about Andrew Blair, but I did. And long story short, yeah, I've got a Phantom Elite. I've got 4 1-sticks, and that's what I go in the woods with. And I literally haven't sat in a tree stand in 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that's good. That's some good stuff. Dude, it's amazing how someone like yourself that hunted out of a tree stand, all that stuff, and you switch to that saddle, and when you find your comfort, right, and you find your comfort as far as actual comfort sitting in it, as well as your comfort moving around the tree, shooting out of it, all that stuff. It's amazing how that's kind of it, right? Like, yeah. I know that you'll hear some people like, well, certain situations, and I'm like, what other situation would you not use it, right? like that, like that's. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but it's the contradictory where it's like, where would you not use it? You could use it anywhere.
Yeah, especially, I mean, like the biggest thing, even when I did get into it, was weak side shooting. How do you handle the weak side shooting? I shot probably 12 deer out of the saddle, and I think I've shot 1 strong side with my bow.
Yeah,
it's like you just figure it out. You either use your platform like a tree stand, and I do have a Phantom or a Predator XL, so I do have the bigger one, and I do wear a size 13 boot, so it's not like I'm a small human being.
Yep.
But I'm able to use it like a tree stand if I need to. I use it like a saddle if I need to, and you just make it work. It's not hard. You spend an hour in it, it's figured out.
Yep, I agree. I like it. What about filming? You were saying earlier, having a friend come film you. Do you do any more of that type of stuff, or you just whatever happens in the woods, that's what's going down?
Yeah, no, we kind of got out of that whole filming thing. I did a couple of like trips for Trigicon. Got to go over to New Zealand a couple times.
Red stag.
Yeah, I shot a red stag while I was there.
Dude, that's crazy.
I was filming these stags walk across this pasture, and Dan Catlin, the senior vice president of the wildlife gallery. I was there with him. He comes over, taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, "Hey, let me see your camera." I'm like, "Dan, what do you want me to film for you?" And he brought me here to do this job. He's like, "No, I'm gonna film you shoot that stag." I'm like, "Holy shit, let's do that." so yeah, I was fortunate enough to shoot a stag while I was there, and then went back the following year. Just a great family, a great place to go. Pretty incredible. Did a fair amount of filming for Nugent, the Motor City Madman. That kind of put a sour taste in my mouth. And after that, I said, that's it for me. So I just go in the timber now by myself or with my buddies. So.
Yep. No, that's cool. Is it true or false that you killed a turkey using a grunt call?
I killed a turkey using a grunt call on Facebook Live. Yeah, I did do that. Yeah, I was with my buddy Andy Birch. It's still on my Facebook. Yeah, we were just being as dumb could be, checking the wind, just being stupid. And all of a sudden, these turkeys hammer at like 40 yards behind us. And it's like we went from, being idiots to being serious idiots, and I ended up shooting one. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was funny. Probably my favorite turkey hunt.
You don't need a friggin' turkey call. You don't need that $90 whatever meat eater slate call. You just need to go after and use some grunts.
Yep, absolutely.
Wade, that's awesome, dude. This was fun. Dimitri, anything else before we kick Wade off and we we'll shoot the shit with him for a few minutes after we hit record?
I don't think so.
Awesome, man. Wade, dude, I appreciate it. I gained a lot because again, it's very similar for what you're going through, like dealing with and kind of like I just love talking to people that just are so passionate about hunting, and you could see it, man. And I thoroughly enjoyed your stories. I got stuff. I've wrote a good amount of stuff down. It's been a while since I've done that, and man, I appreciate it, dude. And where could people find you? After listening to the podcast, maybe see all the nice big bucks that we see hanging behind you, maybe on social media and whatnot.
Yeah, probably my Instagram's probably where I post the majority of my stuff. I pretty well only use that for hunting things. I don't really put much life or work things on there very often. So just Wade Childs on Instagram would probably be the place to find me.
Awesome, dude. I appreciate it. One last question. Now that you have that Iowa buck, are you putting in points again for another couple of years?
Oh yeah, it's my buddy and I we deleted all the we brought our cell cams together and put them all under my account. We had like a big long talk 2 or 3 days ago, like, okay, we need to delete these cameras off my account, so we stopped paying for them. It's time to put a pin in it until 2028 we can go do this again. And it was a little tough pill to swallow, looking forward to it for so long. But yeah, we're going back to Iowa for sure.
I like that, dude. Well, I appreciate it, Wade. Everybody go check out Wade. Great dude. He's a killer, man. Check him out. Thanks again, everybody. See you next week. Antler Up.